I am Thomas Bowles, Ag Agent from Prince William County, and I am for the soil, for the future, and for the planet.
It is a distinct pleasure to welcome everyone to another episode of For the Soil, a Conversation. I'm your host, Jeff Ishii. Our co-host will join us in just a few moments along with our very special guest, and I'm just going to tease it now by saying she is a champion. Indeed, she is a world champion. She'll join us in just a few moments, but first of all, I wanted to remind everyone of our website, forthesoil.org, and specifically the blog page at our website, forthesoil.org. One of the most recent blog entries recognizes the winners of a recent poster contest sponsored by the Virginia Association of Soil and Water Conservation Districts, and this is a poster contest from kids all around the Commonwealth of Virginia, grade school students from kindergarten right on through seniors in high school, and I think you'll find some of the posters that they drew extremely interesting. I thought they were very well done on a variety of topics related to soil health. So once again, that is at forthesoil.org, and on the menu bar at the top of the page, over on the right-hand side, you'll see blog, and then just click on that entry for Virginia Association of Soil and Water Conservation Districts names winners of the Healthy Soils, Healthy Life poster contest. I think you'll find that very interesting. Now, our first episode of 2023. Welcome, everyone, to For the Soil, a Conversation. I'm your host, Jeff Ishii, and joining us today, Mr. Eric Benfelt with Virginia Cooperative Extension, Community Viability. Mary is not able to join us today, but she will join us in future episodes. But Eric, we have a very special guest today who really, I'm not sure if she really needs an introduction. Claire, I Googled your name, just your first name, and the term soil judge, and Google spat back thousands of entries, Clare, soil judge. So you don't really need a whole lot of introduction. But Eric, if you would do the honors of introducing our special guest today.
Well, thank you, Jeff. As you said, we're very pleased to have Clare Tallamy with us from Virginia Tech and the School of Plant and Environmental Science and Virginia Tech's soil judging team. And Clare is a rising senior at Virginia Tech and has really been instrumental in the success of that team. So welcome, Clare. And as a first question, if you could just share a little bit more background and really what interest drew you to soil science and soil judging.
Yeah, well, thank you, first of all, for having me on the show this morning. It's really an honor to get to talk to you guys. But I think my interest in soil started out when I was really young. I think for most people, that's where it starts. Because what child doesn't want to dig in the dirt? I have younger brothers, that's all they do. They love sticking their hands in things and getting messy. And I do too. It's really fun. I was also an avid gardener as a child. I remember the first cantaloupe I ever harvested and how happy I was. And the soil really contributes to that growth in those plants. And when I got into college, I really took interest in soils because they're so endlessly fascinating. There's so many things that you could do with soils. And so I didn't have to pigeonhole myself into one discipline. I could study anything. I could study physics, I could study chemistry, I could study ecology, I could study morphology or pedology, which is the study of how soils form and how they look. And I hate being bored. And so with soils, you never get bored. And that's really why I love studying them. And soil judging specifically, it was COVID. I joined the team because I had nothing else to do and I needed to get out of my dorm and I knew I loved soil. And I was just interested in learning something new. And I didn't know that I was going to find my greatest passion,
And now you are the individual winner of the International Soil Judging Contest that was earlier this year. Congratulations. You are also a member of the winning team I believe, with Virginia Tech. Is that correct?
Yes, so these are all separate contests, really. So there was the national contest in the spring, in which Virginia Tech won. We won every single category. My teammate Ben Atkins won the first place individual for that. We won best group judging, which is where we work together to describe soils, and then we won best overall. And then at the international contest, I actually competed for Australia, and I placed first individually there as well. And then my Australian team, we got second place to the United States. But I count everything as a win. You know, even if you don't win, it's still fun because you learn something. So,
well, congratulations. That is quite an accomplishment. And to think that we have the overall champions of soil judging here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, that brings a lot of people a lot of pride, and congratulations on your accomplishments. Were you a member of 4-H or FFA?
you know, I wish. I actually come from suburban Virginia, in which I did not see a farm until I was in college. I used to go to like community farms. My mom used to illustrate greeting cards actually for community farms to sell at these kind of marketplaces, but I didn't really have a real grip on agriculture until I was in college, because in the suburbs, you can't even have chickens in your yard. That was always very sad. But I actually didn't know what 4-H was until college. So.
I'd like for you to tell us about the competition. This was held, I believe, in Scotland.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
Help our listeners envision, what do you do at a soil judging competition? And I've heard the word pit mentioned several times in this competition. Describe all that to us.
Yes. So pits in these contests are pretty big. Some of them in Scotland were pretty small because of how, I guess, treacherous the landscape was. I can probably send you guys photos to post, but some of these pits were the size of me. So probably my favorite photo is me laying with I'm completely flat on the ground, and my front half is in the pit, and then my back half is outside of the pit laying on the ground, and I'm just like digging sideways to try and get the soil out of the side of the pit because it's too small for me to get in. But usually they can fit 8 to 10 people. Virginia Tech has a large team, so we have photos of all of us standing in pits. There's like 15 to 18 of us, kind of stuffed in there like sardines. And they're about my height or taller, so think like 6 feet sometimes, how deep these things are, because soils go pretty deep unless they hit bedrock really early. So we're describing all the way down until we're hitting those C or R horizons, which are parent material or rock or unconsolidated sand.
So
like
one
that.
team goes into the pit and you're doing this analysis, I guess, and we can get a little bit more in depth into that. And then another team comes in and another team comes in. And how many pits are there? And
yes, we described 4 pits in one day, and we're kind of broken up into rotations. So I'm actually not with my team when I'm doing these contests. I'm individually doing them. And so what will happen is I only have one teammate with me, and then there's a ton of other people from different schools, and we're put on rotations of usually 6 to 8 people in the pit at the time. And then the rotations go 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, and then 20 minutes.
So Claire, if you could also maybe step back, because I think when a pit, I think most of the time it's not being dug by hand, but maybe with a backhoe to maybe 6 feet. If you could actually describe the process, and when you think about a pit, the soil has a certain profile that if you could step people through that as to, you know, starting, most of the people would probably see maybe if their garden is exposed, they would see the topsoil, or if they're driving along, maybe a roadside cut or something like that. If you could just walk us through the process of what you're looking at it with a soil profile and as you climb down into that pit.
Yeah, of course. So most people, again, like you said, will only see a surface horizon or layer. And what I find so cool is when you dig down, you never know what you're going to find, because soils are affected by so many different things that every soil looks different no matter where you are. So these pits for Virginia Tech, sometimes when we're on campus, we'll dig pits by hand. But for contests, to get pits that are 6 feet deep and 4 feet wide and big enough to fit people, those are dug with backhoes. And so that heavy machinery costs a lot of money. So we don't usually have backhoe pits for practice, but for contests we do. And it's just like, you see a bulldozer just swipe through the earth and just like take out a huge chunk. And then what soil scientists do is we go in and we kind of clean off the pit face or the cross section to make sure that there's no smearing from the backhoe, that there's nothing like obscuring how the soil looks. And then we go in and delineate kind of where those layers are, or we look at where certain physical or chemical properties are changing with depth. And then those are called soil horizons. And so typically those are delineated or separated out by structure, color, or texture. And soil texture is, think like sandy soil or clayey soil. And so that's how we're kind of separating those out. And then we can use those layers to then describe the species of soil, is the best way to think about it. There's a whole soil taxonomy, or how the US names soil, but really you're thinking like species, genus, order, like if you're identifying a plant. We're doing that, but with soil.
Let me ask a farmer question, and I'm going to pose this as if I were a farmer. I'm not a farmer, but if I were a Virginia soybean grower in central Virginia, and I wanted to learn more about my soil profile, and I have a backhoe, I could dig a pit. What am I looking for, and what would be the ideal profile for growing a rotation of field crops like soybeans and corn and small grains? What would be the ideal profile?
Yeah, so first of all, you don't always need a backhoe to identify your soil type. You can always go on a web soil survey and look at kind of what soil scientists have already decided your soil type is. And then I think usually in Virginia, we have pretty hardy soils for growing row crops. Our dominant soil order is altisols, or think like kind of that orange, red, typical southeastern soil. It's pretty leached, so we do have to add a lot of fertilizer, but usually it holds a lot of water, and it's pretty deep. So that's pretty important for deeply rooted crops. I wouldn't say there's lots of bad soils for growing crops in Virginia. I don't think you would be looking for anything specific unless you're on a mountainside where you have really shallow to bedrock soils. That's not ideal. Obviously in Appalachia, we have a lot of stuff in forest, and that's why, because we have such shallow soils. And then on the coastal plain, you have really deep sands. So sometimes that can be a problem. And you can also have problems with water, flooding and things like that in the coastal plain.
And Claire, with our interest in soil health, there's a lot of how do you enhance soil biology and also maximize living roots. I imagine as you dig these pits that you come into different situations, whether it's, the age of soils where maybe the soil's been eroded or compacted. And I know you've probably traveled around Virginia looking at different soils, but what can you tell us about the importance of biology and rooting depth of when a profile is pretty accessible for plants?
Yeah, so you can, I am of the, I guess, house of thought that there's no bad soil. When you're soil judging, you're not really looking for bad or good soil, as a lot of people would think. You're just looking for soil and trying to identify it and look at its properties. But I've seen a lot of soils. Recently, we were in South Carolina. There was a clay soil, just clay all the way to the surface, which is really bad for rooting plants because you're not getting that granular structure at the top where roots can really have access to water and nutrients. You're not getting that dark color caused by organic matter. And so those are things that when we're looking for A horizons or surface horizons, that's what identifies them. And so they're dark, they're soft, they're, what you really think of when you think of earth, or like you hold it in your hands and it's nice to feel. So a lot of times in agricultural lands, we're not getting those types of really nice, healthy A horizons. We're getting truncated soils from erosion. we're getting highly leached soils, we're getting pale soils, and that's usually because of just really consistent cultivation. And like you said, covering your soil does so much for an A horizon or a surface horizon, because it really adds that organic matter to make it nice and dark. It adds more roots. So I think most of the time in agricultural lands, we're really not seeing healthy A horizons, you could say.
We're talking today with Clare Tallamy. She is the individual winner of the International Soil Judging Contest in 2022. She is a senior in environmental sciences at Virginia Tech in Blacksburg. And just a couple of minutes remaining, Clare, talk a little bit about the team, about your coaches, and who they are and how they inspired you to achieve what you have.
Yeah, so we have two coaches, Dr. John Galbraith, he's a professor here at Virginia Tech, and then Jacqueline Fiola, Dr. Jacqueline Fiola, she just recently defended and got her doctorate in soil science here at Virginia Tech. And I think they both have inspired me so much. I think they had so much faith in me when I first started out and really showed me what I could really do. And Jacqueline especially has been so instrumental in me, wanting to go get my PhD, wanting to continue soil science. She has supported me in so many ways. And so is Dr. Galbraith. I mean, I look at them as like my parents when I'm not at home, because we just spend so much time together. And yeah, and my teammates, we're just best friends, honestly. Sorry, there's a lawnmower.
That's all right.
Because we spend so much time together, I think you're kind of forced to be friends, or some kind of weird family, just like a really weird family.
Well, once again, on behalf of all of us here at For the Soil, a conversation, and I think I speak for the agriculture, horticulture community as a whole, we're certainly proud of what you and your team have accomplished. And we're really pleased to know that the soil judging champions of the world are Virginians. That makes us a lot of us really happy. Unfortunately, our time is up. And Eric, I want to thank you for joining us today, and also Clare Tallamy, the individual winner of the International Soil Judging Contest and a senior in environmental sciences at Virginia Tech in Blacksburg. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank
Thank you, Clare.
For the Soil, a conversation is made possible with funding support from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the Agua Fund. Other partners include the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Natural Resources Conservation Service, Virginia Cooperative Extension, Virginia State University, Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, and partners of the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. Views expressed on this podcast are those of each individual guest. To download a copy of this or any other episode, visit the website forthesoil.org. If you have a specific question about soil health, just call your local extension office, your local USDA service center, or a Soil and Water Conservation District office. Music used during today's program was provided courtesy of Jackson F. Smith. All rights reserved. For the Soil, a conversation is produced by On the Farm Radio in collaboration with Virginia Tech. I'm your host, Jeff Ishii.